as I always talk about, 2 minutes to say, hey, who is Fuji? Fuji is about 600 people. We're worldwide. Offices headquartered in the US. We're a US-based company. We have a huge office in India. We have a growing office down in Costa Rica. My Costa Rican office, besides Costa Rica just being the most amazingly beautiful place you've ever been to, because I can say that, I was just there, they're also on the central time zone in the US. So we do a lot of our support services, managed services, et cetera, for our US customers so that they are in their same time zone. And you can see number of engineers, things we have. From a services perspective, we only focus on 4 key areas. We do low code, no code, product engineering, quality engineering type stuff. We do cloud services, migrate to cloud, move to cloud. We do cybersecurity and everything related to security that you could imagine. And then the one we're talking about today, lots of data engineering, data visualization, analytics stuff. And that's where I have an extreme passion. So you may be asking, who am I? And if you've been to one of my sessions before, welcome back. You probably heard this before. I'm an ex-Microsoft employee. I worked at Microsoft for 18 and a half years, roughly, as mainly a senior technical person. But I helped build the Microsoft seminar division. So if you've ever been to MSDN or TechNet or TS2 or the small business groups or whatever, those were all my divisions at Microsoft that I helped run as part of a seminar team. I helped found that team, build it up, ran it for about 12 years. I am what's called a technology generalist, and I just bring that up because we have a lot of people at Fuji who are real hardcore specialists. They know Azure to the deepest level, or AWS to the deepest level, or any other technology. My job was always to help the interconnectedness between applications. So they may know Azure, but they don't really understand how Azure necessarily works with Exchange Server and hooks to SQL Server and plugs in on the back end to whatever. That's where I come in. That's what a generalist is. And just as a separate side note, I'll tell you, I think that's what the industry is losing, is they don't have enough generalists. People are so focused on their individual tool, they don't realize how that builds out a much bigger, greater solution. It's just my personal opinion. I left Microsoft in 2008, and I have been consulting on partners for years, teaching them how to grow their Microsoft business. And then I found Fuji, and I absolutely love Fuji. It's they get it. They understand what it means to take care of both customers and employees, and that's what I love most about them. So very happy that I'm here and love it. Passionate about solving technical problems. All right, so that's who I am. Let's get into the demo. So that's it. That was the whole sales pitch. I have already set up the plumbing for today's demo, and I'm not trying to rob you. If we did a full Power BI session, literally it would probably be a week long. That's how much content I have. So to save time, and because I've already done webinars on this topic and will continue to do them in the future, I've already done Power BI sessions on how do you connect to your data, how do you transform your data, how do you take a flat file and turn it into a relational database? All that stuff, that's already been set and done to start today's demo. So I'm going to flip over real quick to Power BI, and I'm going to show you that I've already loaded the tables. So again, we're not going to go into that today. That was from a previous webinar, and I will have future sessions. If you're interested in that, we can get you back in another one. They're all free. But I just wanted to save time and actually get into the analytics of this. When I built this content, I told you I worked on the seminar team for Microsoft. I actually was one of the leaders and founders of that team. When I did that, we always built our own content. So what you're seeing today is totally custom content. I've been doing it for 30 years now. I think I got it down pretty good. But you're not going to see this anywhere else. There's no one else that does it this way. There's no one else that uses this data. What I've done is I've created a massive database. It's only about 1 million records, but that's pretty good for a demo database, of a fictional shoe store, okay? And just to kind of lay the land out here, the shoe store has 16 different locations. They're divided up 4 stores in 4 regions. They have employees. They have sales of shoes. And the reason I chose shoes, when I started teaching Power BI in particular, customers were like, well, we want you to use our data. And the first one I did was a oil company here in Texas, a large oil company. And the next thing you know, I'm doing reports with, pipe fittings and cross wrenches, and I had no idea what any one of it was. And as I tried to use some analogies, the audience, my students, couldn't figure it out. So I settled on shoes because everyone understands shoes. And this is important because when we get into this data and we start looking for these anomalies, you're going to want to think like a shoe person, someone who sells shoes for a living. Shoes have styles, shoes have colors, shoes have types. If I go show you this data and the tables that these are in, go to my sales table, for instance, we can go look at these, and I can see that they have genders. There's women's shoes, men's shoes. They have occasions, dress shoes, outdoor shoes, athletic shoes. There's different types of shoes. And the point here is I don't have to explain this to you. You've been buying shoes your whole life. You get this. They have colors. They have styles. The anomalies that I built into this program are not just random data sets. They're actually things that have happened in real world that have affected our data. And they're buried, in some cases, deep, deep, deep in this database. And so what we're going to do for the next hour is I'm going to show you how to use Power BI and the tools to uncover some of this. And it's kind of like, the best term I can give you, it's like CSI, right? Crime scene investigators. In other words, you're going to create some reports and something is going to stick out of the norm. There's going to be an anomaly there that's like, everything matches to this except this one data point. And that won't tell you the whole story, but what we want to do is use Power BI to acknowledge and find the data point. And then most importantly, when we find it, go the next level and keep digging and digging and digging until we find the truth of what this data is trying to tell us. So in this sample database that I've created, I've got 20 of these anomalies. Again, they're not just random events. They're real life, real situations resulting on how the data all came out. And we're going to use this tool to get in there and start analyzing and going through it. So now that everyone's on board, looks like we have 23 people so far. A quick reminder, use your Q&A session or use your Q&A window if you want to prompt a question for me or ask me to go slower or deeper into a particular topic. As I said, this is all custom, so I can take this in any direction that we want to go. So now that I have connected to my data, now that I have transformed my data, we're now ready to kind of dig into the data. And if you think about it, we're going to talk about databases in general. Most people are used to, or they started out in like an Excel file. That's a flat file database. And in a little bit, I'll get into the difference of how those type of databases differ from what we call a columnar database, which is what Power BI does. There is one more caveat. I'm sorry for jumping around, but I just realized I should mention this. 2 weeks ago, Microsoft hosted their developer conference, and they showed some of the new AI integration that they're putting into Power BI. And they're actually changing the data connectors and how Power BI will work with your enterprise data sets in some mind-blowing ways. I saw them in a demo hit a trillion record database, and in a second, they were able to spin and pivot and pull data in real time. It was just a phenomenal throughput. I bring that up because what I'm telling you, everything I'm telling you today is totally valid. It will continue to work, but Microsoft's also changing the game by implementing some of this new AI technology in here. They're coming out with new updated versions, and I will be updating my content as well to show you some of these new cool things. I'm not ready for that. I haven't even started on it, but when I get a few days, I'm going to go dive in and build some new demos to just be able to show you some of this new technology. So I just want to make sure you understand that this is constantly changing. It's all new, it's exciting, but that everything I'm teaching you today is still 100% valid, still works the same way. Okay, so with that being said, I don't see any questions on the board. We're going to go ahead and dive right in, and now we're going to take this data and we're going to start analyzing it. And I always start kind of slow. And this, I'm going to have a little bit, if you're brand new to Power BI, or if you're kind of an intermediate user, if you're advanced. My webinars, I always try to give a little for each. I don't want to bore you if I go too advanced, and I don't want to go over everyone's heads. I am curious, let's go ahead and do this in our question and answer session. Go ahead and use the question session and post up to me. Just tell me if you think you're a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced. I can get a feel for the crowd so I know exactly how much time to spend in each one. So if you'll open up the questions and just write a question in there and just say, you know, intermediate, advanced, or beginner, that'll give me a feel. So I see an intermediate from Hassan, thank you. He's evidently the only one that can type, so good job, Hassan. Oh, there we go. Todd's intermediate, Samir, Steven's a beginner. Welcome. Excellent. Okay, good. Everyone's kind of in this middle ground area. Oh, we have one advanced person. Excellent. Couple beginners. Okay, so that gives me a good feel. So it is kind of a balanced deal. I'll make sure I adjust everything accordingly. Well, let's get after it. For you beginners, the way we start is Microsoft gives us kind of this blank page. And a little bit of history here. This blank page used to literally be a blank page. And Microsoft did testing on Power BI, user testing, and customers would just sit and look at the blank page and not have any idea what to do. So Microsoft finally decided, yeah, let's go ahead and put this back in. When I worked at Microsoft, I actually did analytics for Microsoft. I wasn't just a technical person. And when I ran the seminar team, I was responsible for analyzing all of the results of our seminars, from evaluations to who attended to what did they purchase afterwards, et cetera. And I was fortunate, and believe me, it was not because of any talent on my behalf, but I was fortunate enough to go in front of the Microsoft executives, the entire board of directors actually, and present our findings on a pretty regular basis. So I got to present in front of Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer and all the big chieftains. And the reason I tell you that story is I'm not just teaching you how to use the product, I've really used it in these kind of high pressure, high value situations. So I'm going to use some of those examples. In this case, we just want to get a feel for how these stores are doing in their sales. And so what you do is you just click anywhere in here inside this kind of blank area, and we can go over to these visualizations and we can just select one. Like this is a stacked bar or a vertically stacked bar or multiples. You just click through these pie charts, scatter charts, whatever you want. You'll notice that it's just giving me a placeholder, and that this placeholder has these borders around it, which allow me to kind of stretch it out. And in typical Microsoft fashion, you know, you can tell it the size and shape. If you're familiar with pivot tables, what it's done when I have this object selected is it's now asking me what values, just like a pivot table, I would like to put into this data. Now, I've told you already, I've gone in and I've set up my relationships between my tables. So you can see this was work done before, where I have my reps tied into the sales rep ID for my sales table. The colors of the shoes come in through a color ID. The stores themselves are in a store ID. So all this data is kind of strung together correctly from that standpoint. And this allows me just to grab from any of these tables and pull data in. Now, to give you some familiarity with what we're doing, in the sales process, we have the ability to do the sale of the shoe, what we sold the shoe for, as well as the manufacturer's suggested retail price. One of the other reasons I did the shoe database is in college, I actually sold women's shoes. Whoops, let me make that go away. I actually sold women's shoes and for a living to help put myself through college. And one of the things I discovered in women's shoes is basically the retailer buys the shoe for, let's say, $50, and then immediately they double the price. So they'll mark it up to $100, and then they decide what additional they want on it. So if you want a high profit version of business, go sell shoes, because boy, they make a lot of money off that. But anyway, so the manufacturer's suggested retail price is what the person thinks they should sell it at. The actual price is what they sold it at. And when I teach my classes, I always tell them, let's start with what you're ultimately looking for. What's the thing that you're trying to understand? I'm trying to understand what I sold, my actual price here. So whatever that is, I teach my classes, just immediately take that and drag that into the y-axis. This is the problem with not using Teams, is it hasn't marked me as unavailable, and I guess I should do that very, very quickly. Let me go here. No, I am marked unavailable. I'm not sure why that's coming through. Anyway, so I just dropped in the value that I'm interested in, the sum of the actual price. So it's just giving me a summation of this. And you'll see it's giving me a single dot. And if I hover over that dot, it's telling me I've sold $87 million in shoes. Okay, the reason it's giving me just a single dot is I haven't given it anything else to go off of. So for example, we use the legend as a way to say, well, show me all the variances of the dots based on, in this case, the different stores. So I'm going to go down to the stores table. I'm going to grab the current stores and I'm going to throw them into the legend. And now you'll see I have a bunch of dots, right? So each one of these is color coordinated: Charlotte, Chicago, Dallas, Las Vegas. These are all US based cities, since this is a US example. But I now apply these out here. The last thing I want to do is I'm going to go up and grab the sales date and I'm going to throw that across the x-axis. So now it'll make it into an actual line. And you'll notice that it's come in this very ugly, squiggly pattern. This is something that's recently changed in Power BI, just within the last year. And what you're seeing here is what's called a hierarchy. And we really want to get into hierarchies because they're very important in understanding some of the data that we're going to be analyzing. When I threw in sales date, you'll see that it's kind of subdivided this and put year, quarter, month, and day. What's interesting about this is those fields actually don't exist anywhere in my database. So if I go back to my tables and I look at my sales, you'll see the sales date is 1/7/2010, but I don't have a column called year. I don't have a column called day or quarter or month. So what Power BI is doing is it's auto calculating for me because it knows that this is a date field. And because it's a date field, it knows by default that dates are made up of years, months, quarters, and days. So it's done that for me without me having to set that up in my database. In a little bit, we're going to show you how you add a date time table, which will take that to the nth degree. We'll really expand that in different interesting ways. But for now, it's calculating based on this. It knows to read this and it says, okay, the month is 1, so that's January. The day is 7, and the date is 2010. So it's automatically cutting these out, even though I don't have those column information, and it's adding them into my report. That's what you see here. And it's put this into a hierarchy from the largest value, year, to quarter, to month, to day. It used to be in Power BI that when you did this, Power BI would then set your graph or your chart at the highest level. But recent updates, they've changed this, and now it's setting it at the lowest level, meaning I'm seeing a daily basis of data for each one of my cities. And as you can tell, it's almost impossible to read these. Well, there's a couple things we can do. First off, we're going to go click outside of this graph. Remember, the graph is selected, so I see the border, I see the handles, I know that this is the object I have selected. I'm going to click out in the open space, so it's no longer selected, and I'm going to drop in what's called a slicer. And the slicer, if I put it in, it is a repository that says if you want to filter this data on your page by a particular value, I just add that to the slicer and it will automatically create that filter for me. There's a ton of other ways we can do filters. We can put filters on pages, we can put filters on data, we can put filters on everything, but this is the easiest way to create an interface that I can quickly filter. So I'm going to take the store, current stores, that's the name of my stores, and I'm going to drag it and drop it into the filter. And because this is more vertical, I'm going to resize and just pick the whole thing up and drag it over here. So now I see all of my stores listed right here. And if I wanted to just look at, for example, Miami, I'm just now seeing Miami. Now, again, without going deep into the data, we can see something interesting immediately. When you look at the data for Miami, what jumps out to you? Has anyone got an idea? You can come off mute if you have a deal. What's an anomaly we're seeing right here? No one's got a guess. No one sees this really huge line that's way above every other line that's out here. This is our anomaly right here. And so it's like, okay, wait a minute. We found our first anomaly. We have no idea why, but if I hover over that, it looks right around December 31st, January 1st, this number goes way through the roof. And that's a surprise. If I click on Louisville or Los Angeles or Las Vegas, I've noticed I'm seeing some spikes, but this one keeps coming again and again and again. Actually, every single city is showing that same spike on that same day. And so what I realized when I created my sample data is we had some data issues. Basically, we had sales that were repeated for an individual day. They were double loaded. And that's what you're seeing here. I know that's the case. Yeah, I've seen people saying spike in 2011. That's exactly right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Helen. You got it right. But the fact that I'm seeing them again and again and again is showing me visually, I don't even have to go too far into this to realize when the data was loaded, this one day got double or even triple loaded. And the truth of the matter is this was a mistake on my part when I was creating the database itself. I was running some programming and it, for some reason, got caught in a loop and it redid the date 3 times. But I decided to leave it in the demo because this happens in the real world. We get corrupt data sometimes. And if I see it, you know, if it was only on one city, I might say, wow, they had a really good day of sales. But if I see it on every single city again and again and again, I now know I have a data corruption problem and I need to go back and I need to fix that. But as we were flipping around, you see some other things. Like forget this one peak here. As I look at this, what do I notice? Well, they're kind of trucking along. This is Los Angeles. And they consistently are kind of down in here, and all of a sudden they do a drop, and then they start escalating, right? Starts going on an upward trend. Or if I click on Atlanta, or notice they've got a big drop here for some apparent reason. So this is a great way to just kind of filter through and look at stuff. Huge drop here, huge drop here. I got to figure out what's going on there. I had a really bad day back here on August 25th, roughly. Might want to investigate that. So when I first go after my data, I attack it in this way. Now, I told you about the hierarchy. When you click back on the chart, remember this is the hierarchy. Before it used to start at the top and you worked your way down. Now it starts at the most detailed and you can work your way up. And the way you do this is through these arrows that you see here. You'll notice it says drill up, drill down, and then we have these double arrows and a little forked arrow. The up simply means I'm going to move up this level of hierarchy. So right now I'm looking at every day, and I know that because I can hover over this and I can see this is January 1st of 2011 when this particular data problem happened. So I know that that is indeed the case. Let me get this back on. Click too far. Come on. There we go. So I know this is on days. Well, I'm going to move up the hierarchy by clicking the up arrow, and it's going to move from day, it's going to go up to month. And watch what happens when I do this. I click, and now it's gone, and it's showing me the individual months themselves. Notice it doesn't say January 1 or February 1. It says February. It's the entire synopsis for the month of February of 2010. And I can go here, and I can prove this, by the way. I start January, February, March. Notice as I'm pulling, it's snapping to each one of these. It goes through 12 dates, and then I start back over with 2011, 2012, 2013. So by moving up the axis from day, where I had 30, 31, 28 days per month, then I went to months, I've got 12 months. What if I go up the hierarchy again to quarters? Now it's going to turn it into quarters. Q1, snap Q2, snap Q3, snap Q4, back to Q1. So this is a great way to take your data and add detail or remove detail so you can get the better picture. If I move all the way up this thing, by the way, this is the year, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013. And I've got this filtered for Charlotte. Let me just take this off. There are all 16 of my retail environments. So all my 16 stores inside my retail deal, and they're all shown on a yearly basis. So I could just look at this data and get a feel for it. Now let's play analyst again. Let's look at this data. Use your question window again, and let me know, what do you see that you think is interesting? If I showed this to a bunch of executives, what are a couple things they would immediately visually pull out? Remember, this is almost 1 million pieces of data, and in seconds, I'm able to visualize it with a tool like this. What is this tool telling me? Anything in particular that anyone sees that they want to share? If you were playing the analyst as a CEO or CFO. Philly's prices are higher than other locations. You're exactly right, Brandon. Although it's not prices, it's their sales. Philadelphia, which you notice up here in blue, is killing it. Not only are they #1, but they're consistently #1 by a huge margin. Look at the margin between 2, 3, and 4. They're right next to each other, but Philly is, you know, exponentially larger. Something really good is going on in Philly. Someone says, what's happening with the light pink going down to 0? Yeah, that's a great one, right? I look down here, light pink is Dallas, I think. And for some strange reason, it looks like they're kind of middle of the pack. And then all of a sudden, somewhere around 2013, they start plummeting, 2014, 2015, and now they're sliding all the way off the face of the earth. I've got some real performance issues in Dallas. People pointed out, Helen pointed out, Philly's got the highest sales. She's exactly right. Now, again, remember that we're looking at this from a year perspective, okay? And I want you to be careful because although this is very interesting, I can see these trend lines moving up, I can see these trend lines moving down. It can get a little busy. It's kind of hard to see. For example, in here, the lines are overlapping and I can't really tell who's what. There's a couple problems or a couple ways we can solve that. You can put as many slicers onto a page as you want. So one of the other slicers I can add to this, besides which city it's in, is I can put in the region that it's in. Remember that each one of these is in 4 different regions. So for example, I could just say, show me only the Northeast. And you'll notice that any filter that's put on here in the slicer filters all the other information, including the stores and including the graphs. So I'm only looking at the 4 that make up the Northeast: Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. If I click on the Northwest, now I'm looking at that. There's some interesting things happening here. We got that huge separation. It was Seattle, by the way, not Dallas, that really plummeted off the face of the earth. That's an anomaly. We're going to want to figure out what's going on there. Let's keep going. Let's look at the Southeast. Huge jump. Whatever happened in Charlotte, Charlotte was kind of medium pack, and all of a sudden they actually went above Atlanta, who was #1 for a long time, kept that, and then now they've fallen back down. So huge change sweep going on here in Atlanta. Let's go look at the Southeast. Same thing. I have a huge uptick here in Los Angeles. That's an anomaly I want to figure out. So I'm giving you some easy ones, right? It's easy to just see these trends and say, oh, that's an anomaly, but we're going to see in just a minute. Some of these anomalies go really, really deep, and we got to kind of dive into them and figure out what it is. So this is one way to do this, is the ability to spin these up or down. And I'm just putting these by region so I can look at them a little bit easier. Because remember, if I take the regions off, so I just select it again to take it off, now I'm looking at all of these cities, and it become kind of blinding to try and figure out what exactly is going on. I can't even tell, you know, which store is doing better than the other, or how this data is coming about, or what's happening. Let me load this up here, slide this over. So we want to take this even further. We want to kind of dive into this, but I want to make sure you understand we use this up and down arrow in the hierarchy to go down and check out the different information. Now, you'll notice when I'm going down, there's 2 different arrows. There's a double arrow and there's a forked arrow, and it's really important to understand the difference between these. They are both used to move up and down the hierarchy. But when I go down the hierarchy, the fork arrow is going to give me the next level in the hierarchy without regard to the previous data of the hierarchy. In other words, I'm going to look at quarters without looking at years at the same time. So if I do this with the double arrow, I want you to watch what happens. This should take me from years, which I'm in right now, 2010, 2011, 2013. If I go down the hierarchy, I should go to quarters. Well, watch what happens when I use the double arrows to go down to the next level. It's going to ignore the year, and now I see is Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Well, what's the purpose of this? If I'm looking at this Q3 data, in this particular case for Atlanta or Philadelphia here at the top, this is Q3 of what year? Who can tell me what year I'm looking at when I look at this Q3? Any ideas? Well, the answer is I'm looking at all the years. So it's actually taking a look now using these double arrows gives me an address of seasonality, meaning that I'm looking at all the Q2s as if they were a single entity Q2, all the Q3s. So if we look at this chart, we don't see really too strong of seasonality. Everyone kind of follows pretty close to the same path. There's a little bit of difference, but nothing drastic. Let's go down one more though. Let's keep that seasonality by using the double-headed arrows, and instead of quarter, let's go down to month. Now I look at the months. So again, when I'm looking at November or September, this is of every year, 2010, 2011, 2012, every single September is added up and it's now shown across each other. And what do I see here? If you show this to some executives and Edisham, I'm going to blow your name. I apologize. I just killed it. Yeah, you're exactly right. Oh, beautiful. He just also picked up on February sales dropped off the face of the earth. We are seeing consistently every single store goes down in February. If you were having to explain to an executive why that might be, again, think about it as you are a shoe store owner. There's actually 6 reasons why, in reality, this is true. Sales in February are the worst month for selling shoes. I'm wondering if anyone can guess why. Think of a reason. Why would our sales for shoes drop in February across the board? Every single one of our stores, doesn't matter if it's in the Northeast or Northwest. So someone said, Brandon said, everyone spent their cash in December. You're 100% correct. Tiffany nailed it. So few people get this. There's only 28 days in February. So if I'm comparing the sales in February versus the sales which have a month of 31 days of sales, obviously I'm going to do a lot less. So just the fewer number of sales is automatically going to drop this down. Other people figured out less days in February. One of the things, this is absolutely true, and I can testify, people would buy shoes for holiday parties in November, December, especially in December. They want to take them out for New Year's or whatever. And then in February, they bring them back. And they're like, oh, they didn't fit well. I want a refund. And of course, they have a cocktail stain on them or whatever the case. Clearly, they wore them, but they just didn't want to pay for them. And shoe stores will take them back. So we used to do that all the time. But anyway, that's another reason. February is the time where you start clearing out your winter inventory and you start looking to spring and Easter and Passover and all those shoe-related kind of events. Your colors change. The type of color of shoe actually will change based on popularity, etc. We sell more greens, we sell more yellows than in the winter months when we sell grays and silvers and golds and things like that. We normalize the sales numbers by dividing monthly sales by working days in a month. Perfect. That's exactly right. And I'm going to get into that. We're going to get into DAX here in just a few minutes where we talk about that. Veronica, who's watching, says I was frozen. Hopefully I'm not frozen. Can you all still hear me and see me? Veronica, let me know if you can still hear me and see me. Okay, I see yes from Tiffany. Thank you. So I might have just glitched for some reason. So this is, you see how the seasonality using these double arrows allow me to look by month, even down by day. So here's a great example where it just falls off the face of the earth on the 30th and 31st, again, because not every month has 30 and 31 days in it, and especially February, which has only 28. So I would naturally expect those numbers to be lower. So that's what that is. I can move back up. This time when I go down, however, if I use the forked arrow, what the forked arrow says is take me to the next level of the hierarchy, but keep the existing data there. So we start with years, I use the forked arrow, and now it's years and months. notice that I have 12 data sets in between the months now, right? Or I'm sorry, I went to quarters. So it's Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and then the next year, Q1, Q2. And notice, so I've got a little more data. At the highest level, this looks like a mild dip. I'm not really worried about it. But this can be misleading when you start analyzing this data. So when I say, okay, well, let's keep that data, but drop down another level of the hierarchy. Now I'm looking at quarters. Okay, hold it. This actually went below a couple of my other stores. This is a much bigger issue than I thought it was. I also see some huge changes happening in Vegas and a couple other areas. People start to shift and change places. Let's go down even another level into the hierarchy. Let's go down to the month level. And again, really starts to get spaghetti-ish and hard to read. But boy, look how big this dip is. It didn't go just barely below 1. It went way below multiple events. That's a huge anomaly. Matter of fact, let's just pick Philadelphia and let's really dive into it, just isolating Philadelphia. And I could see how massive this dip actually was. Well, we need to go figure out what caused this dip. This will be our first one that we'll dive a little deeper, because I want to get off and I want to show you some of the other deeper ways we can do some of this analysis. So here I've got a big dip. By the way, these work just like every other Microsoft product. Maybe everyone in the Northeast, maybe this was a blizzard and no one could shop on this particular period of time. And so I would expect New York, which is right next to Philadelphia, to also have something similar. I can hold down the control key on my keyboard and I can click multiple areas. Let's put Washington, D.C. in there as well. And what I'm not seeing a huge dip in anyone else, even though they're geographically close to each other. I'm not seeing that same dip that's going on inside of Philadelphia. So knowing that we have an anomaly, we found for some reason this dip has occurred. Let's see if we can come up with a reason why Philadelphia would have had this huge crash that suddenly occurred. Again, thinking like a shoe store owner, any thoughts? Maybe, as I mentioned, it could have been a weather event, but if it was, I would have expected to see it in the other nearby cities. So I don't think that's it. It could have been a supplier didn't ship enough shoes. Maybe the delivery truck got stuck. But you can see it lasts for a good period of time. I was good in Q1 of January, but by Q2, it had fallen off the earth. Q3, Q4, Q1 again, excuse me. So what that means is that this dip actually extended over like a period of 5 months. That's a long time. So it's not a delivery issue or it's not anything else available. It didn't go to 0, so my store didn't close, but something must have happened to bring this down. Well, one of the other things we can do is I'm going to go move these off the side. I guess I can leave them right there. Let me show you one other handy tool that I use all the time, and it is called the matrix. And if you're a Excel user, you love this because it's very Excel-ish. There's two issues here. There's one called a table, and there's one called a matrix. Matrix is more like Excel. And what it allows me to do is to go ahead and put the information on here like I was doing a giant spreadsheet, similar to pivot tables. So I could, for example, put in the current stores on my rows. I could put in the sales information. Remember, we said that it was the actual price was the value of sales. So that's what I'm going to put in here. The columns, I want to put in that sales date that I had. And remember that hierarchy comes in. By the way, if you want to, you can expand or contract these same things. So I can, again, drill down or drill up, depending on the data that I'm trying to display in here. So it's only showing me Philadelphia because, again, I have Philadelphia filtered. If I take this off, now it shows all of the sales. When I was at Microsoft, one of the things they used to teach us is we don't talk about Bill Gates and the others, right? You don't do that. It's not considered a good thing to do. But the beauty is I don't work for Microsoft anymore, so I can talk about them all I want. I've been gone now for 10 years. And even though I still contract with Microsoft, I did get the pleasure of meeting him, presenting to him, and working with him on many different occasions. And one thing I can tell you that a lot of people don't know about him, he's an amazing person. He's hilariously funny. Most people don't realize that. But everyone knows he's wickedly smart. I mean, like on a scale well beyond what most people are. And I'm not saying that in any kind of worship deal. I don't give him any extra kudos than anybody else, but I have watched him do things that no human being can do. And one of the things I know, and I've seen it with my own eyes, that he can do is he can look at massive tables of numbers and in seconds can pull out all the anomalies just instantly. I watched him take a table-sized sheet, columns of data, had so many pieces of data on it, and it was like an 8-point font. It was a little micro font. He had never seen it before. He walked up to it and immediately went bam, bam, bam. And what people believe, and I got to be careful because he has never confirmed to me or anyone else that I know that he has this, but if you've ever heard of this thing called synesthesia, we're pretty sure Bill has synesthesia. Synesthesia is where your brain actually crosses over and your senses merge. And the reason I think he has synesthesia is because I've watched him do this multiple times. But I also know he was working with the Excel team when they came up with this concept called conditional formatting. Let me show you what conditional formatting is, and it works the same way in Power BI. Anytime we want to format the data in a table, we're going to go to this little paintbrush here. It says format your visual. Now remember, I got to select the visual first because there's multiple things on here I could be formatting. I want to format this table, so I select the table. I go to the little paintbrush, and it gives me lots and lots of different information. And I can go down through here, and I can select, how do I want my values to be? How do I want my cell elements, etc. Conditional formatting, they changed the name. It's actually down here in the cell elements. It's called background color. Let me just turn it on and show you what it is. If I turn this on, and I'm going to go change the colors because I don't like the blues here. What it does is it looks at each value in the column and compares them with color. And we typically, I always used to do this at Microsoft, we'd use the stoplight, right? Red is bad, yellow is neutral, and green, and I have to change this to green, is good. And just like a stoplight, when you see green, keep going. When you see yellow, have some caution. When you see red, stop everything and figure out what's going on. And so if I apply this conditional formatting to the table, it looks crazy. But one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on the total column, and you're going to see it'll resort it now from the biggest value to the smallest. So here I can see Philadelphia, New York, Dallas, Boston, Chicago, etc. This is what we believe, I believe, Bill Gates' synesthesia does. When he looks at numbers, he sees colors. And instantly, his brain can pull out and say, boom, Los Angeles 2016 had a huge uptick. They used to be kind of in this orangey whatever, and now they're a bright yellow and moving up maybe even into a green. They're that good. So this is how his visual cortex sees numbers. And he insisted that we put it in Excel and now it'll be a Power BI. So this is a fantastic way. It's a great tool to use where I can analyze data quickly. Couple things I can see, again, as executives, just looking at the colors, don't even worry about the numbers. Executives would look at this and they'd say, I see a pretty bad trend. What I see is I used to have two reds. Now I got 3, now I got 4, now I got 5. This seems to be growing. In other words, more of our stores are doing poorly than they were before. And my top store, Philadelphia, it's bright green across the board. It's just killing it. It's #1 without question again and again. Got a lot closer here in 2014. That's what we're going to go investigate right now. But the colors are telling me that story. I don't have to actually read the numbers. And that's what his version of synesthesia does. By the way, just as a separate information, I've researched this because I was so fascinated by this. The English language is filled with synesthetic phrases. We have so many we don't even realize. And I was fascinated when I started to hear these, and I'll give you just a couple. In wintertime, if you've ever heard the point, it's bitter cold outside. If you think about it, what does that even mean? It makes no sense, right? A taste related to how cold it is. But people who are synesthetic, they can, their sense of touch matches their sense of taste. So when they feel cold on their skin, they literally taste bitter on their tongue, which is fascinating. Beethoven, Mozart, all of them were synesthetics. A lot of people have color synesthetics, not just like numbers, but when they hear music, they'll see ribbons of color. Anyway, off the subject, but I think that's absolutely fascinating, something to consider. Helen says, I see Power BI can visualize and analyze the data, and then end users can check if the data points are anomalies. My question is, will Power BI warn the end user that there may be anomalies based on algorithms and models? What a great question. I'm awarding Helen another 1,000,000 imaginary points because that was a fantastic question. I'm going to actually show you how it does that exact thing without you having to do all the work. But rather than, it's kind of like giving you a calculator when you're taking a math test. You first have to learn the concept of mathematics before we give you the tool that does it all for you. Power BI has built into it an anomaly finder that'll go find these anomalies for yourself, or you don't even have to do this. But I want you to see how to do it manually so you can appreciate it when we do it automatically. I sound like my parents when I say that, but anyway. Okay, so let's go dig into this one more time. I want to keep going here. So I'm going to dig to Philadelphia. We see this huge drop. We don't know why. In listing this, you can see the red is just like a big neon light. It's telling me this was not just a little diminishment, it was a huge diminishment. But this doesn't help me by looking by store. So what I want to do is I'm going to take this data, and I'm curious if I go back to these fields, if looking by store doesn't help me, I know it went down, but it doesn't tell me why it went down. What is another way I could look at this that might give me more information, might help me analyze? In other words, what's another factor that could impact how a store does? And because we're short on time, I'm just going to give you this one, just to make it easier. Instead of looking by stores, I'm going to look by sales reps. So I'm going to go up to the rep table, and I'm going to grab the rep names and put it in the rows. You see all the reps come in. I did this totally backwards now. My apologies, because I left on the deal. So let me take this off for a second. So it's showing me all the reps, and that's interesting. I can also put this into, I call this the tornado, but they call this the funnel graph. So I can put in a funnel graph, and I can also list this by reps. So I'll take the rep names, throw it into the category, and then put my values in here. That's interesting. That is not showing me what I want, but that's fine. We'll get rid of that. I think I got off when I was doing some of this other stuff. But what we're going to do is we're going to look by rep information. So let me try this one more time, because I think I set a field that I didn't want. I'm going to put in my rows are going to be my, my column's going to be my sales date. My row's going to be my rep names, and the values that they sold should be my actual price. There we go. And so it's showing this, and it's filtering. I'm only seeing 2010. You'll notice that the other data numbers, because they're working in other different stores. Okay, so that's why it's only filtering on 2010. Looks like I have a page filter. Let me show you how this works real quick. And I've got a backup just in case, so I can pop over and show you this. But you can, I told you that you can filter on the data, you can filter on the object, you can even filter on the page. And so you'll notice the section called filters. And I can go in here, and whatever I do here, I can override the filters on the page. So again, I say I only want to look at New York. Well, I guarantee you these are all the reps, not just the New York reps that I'm seeing here. So this interaction is being broken with this interaction and this interaction. And so this is one of the things that can happen when you apply this. And I'll show you how to fix this real quick. But anyway, what we can do is we can go in here and we can set the filters for the page. So I want this thing. I can say only filter by a particular store or a particular rep, or only give me values that were over a certain amount. You can go really crazy in here, and it's all just drag and drop kind of thing. So show me only when the year is less than 2012, for example. And when I apply this filter, you'll notice that it went in and it's only showing 2010 and 2011. and it's doing this for the entire page, not just this single quantity. So you can get these localized filters. I'm going to take this off real quick. I'm going to get rid of this because I don't want it anymore. So I'm going to erase that filter, and we'll get us back to where we were. The other thing we can do, and I can show this easier when I get this out of the way. So here I have, show me the Northeast. So there are my 4 Northeast areas. Show me just Boston. I have just Boston. If you'll go in here and under the data drill command, so I'm going to click on data drill. Now this is more of an advanced issue or advanced option. And I'm sorry, I want to go to the format command. You'll see this command up here that says edit interactions. What this allows you to do is select an object and tell it how it will impact other objects. To show you how this works, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this graph that I've created, and I'm going to paste it in. I'm just using a copy and paste command. So I've got the same graph here, top to bottom. And when I take off the regions, right, I get the big messy chart. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this format command. I'm going to edit the interactions. And what I'm going to say when I do this is when I click, you'll notice this table is highlighted of all my stores. And then it's put this icon up here that says, do you want me, based on the one you selected, to filter this or not filter this? If I turn it on to filter, which it is now, if I click on Dallas, I only see Dallas. If I go back, however, and I change this to do not filter, watch what happens. Now when I click Dallas, the top graph changes because it is filtering, but the bottom one, I told it don't filter. I want to keep this data exactly as it is. This means that every single object on this page, you can set its interaction with every other object on this page. So that, for example, one of the things I might want to do is drop on a card, and a card, that's this thing right here. I'm going to throw out a card. A card allows you to put whatever data you want. So I'm just going to grab the actual price and just drop it into the card, and you'll see 6.33 million sales for this particular example. Well, this is for Dallas because I have Dallas filtered. If I take Dallas off, it goes up to 87 million. Maybe on my dashboard, I always want it to show the total sales. I don't want it to change no matter what the filter is, because I want to be able to see how much it is as the total versus how much it is just of that city. So here's a great example. Click on the card, go to your format, set the edit interactions, and I can again say if I do or do not want it to have a filter applied to it. So when I click on current stores, for example, I do not want it to filter this. So you'll see this always stays 87 million no matter which one I press. I know we're moving fast. I apologize. This is why, you know, a full day class tends to help. But I just want you to see that you can set up these interactions back and forth to do this. I'm going to save myself some time. I'm going to jump over to one I've already got set up because we're kind of running late. I am talking too much. We only got about 30 minutes. I still have a whole lot more to show. This is that table that I was talking about. And this allows me to go look, and you'll notice New York. I click. Here are all the sales reps for New York, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, Dallas, etc. And I've got a problem here. I keep seeing red, but these are blank values. In this particular case, again, thinking like a shoe store owner, why would a sales rep on a particular day have blank values? What's going on there? Any thoughts? So the answer, just to save time again, is they have days off. So they work 5 days on, 2 days off. They always get 2 days off in a row. Well, the problem is my color formatting is using those as if they were zeros when they aren't. It wasn't like they sold nothing that day. They just didn't work that day. So I need the ability to go in there and turn that off and say, hey, we just want to ignore these values entirely. And so what I can do is I can go into the formatting options again. You can set in different visual effects, visual borders, headers, etc. I'm trying to remember where they moved this to. I think it's under visuals. And there'll be a section in here that says, do you want to, oh, I know why it's not working, because I clicked the slicer instead of click the table. So remember, you always have to click the thing that you're trying to do here to make sure that you're setting the right data here. So what this does is I go in, I can set the columns, the totals, the different information. If you go in here, you can, in the background color, I can actually go in and tell it, how should we format empty values? Should we set them as zeros, or just don't format them at all? So people that didn't work that day, I don't want that to count against them. So if I change this to don't format, and now you'll just see it's an empty block, and now it's only painting red when someone had a really bad day. So as I scroll across this, right, and I move across, you can see people have days on, people have days off, days on, days off, days on. And I've got it down to, again, a daily level. I can move up just through the hierarchy like I normally would, so I can get it up to a higher level if I want to. Let's go back to our data visualization. I've got this on sales date. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back to Philadelphia. We're going to look at our different people, and then as I roll through this, I don't even have to look at it. You're going to start seeing some huge holes. It looks like I only have this through March, so I'll need to expand and change out the value amounts. But what happened is you're going to see Amelia in particular just suddenly drop off the face of the earth. And so if we look, there would be like 4 months where she just didn't sell anything at all. And I always ask people what happened, and most people guess correctly. She went on paternity leave. She had a baby, she didn't work. And so one of my top reps who contributed the most to my sales went on paternity leave. Because she was coming back, I didn't hire someone to replace her. So I just had 5 sales reps instead of 6, and it impacted our business. That's what that huge dip that you see in there is. Let's look at some of the other things we've got set up here. This is one I was talking about regions, and I told you before, let's look at New York, Philadelphia, and Washington. It's combining all of these into a single report, just like it was a single store. And so this is a great example. Remember, I can click on just New York. I see New York, here's Philadelphia, here's Washington. And what I'm noticing is they all have this big dip right here. And if I combine them all together, I'm going to put the whole group in here, put a control, 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 control. And what do I notice? The big dip is still here. For those of you that lived in the Northeast, some of you remember February of 2010 was the giant, what do they call it? Blizzardzilla or whatever, where it just crushed the Northeast. And for an entire week, they were buried in feet upon feet of snow. So this is a good way where I can look by region, and if I see a regional trend that's the same store to store to store, I know that's a weather event. If we went even further, we went into Charlotte, for example, there's a point where you'll see the sales drop just for a single week. And if you look, most people, when they spend time, they go through it and they say, what's going on? And the answer is they had a Category 4 hurricane. And it turns out that people don't like to shop for shoes when there's a Category 4 hurricane blowing. So obviously, that's the case. Let me give you one other while I'm here. Let's take a look at Boston. So I've got Boston, and I've got this broken out by different areas. I've got it by month, by year, by date. I'm going to show you how to create what's called a date table. But let me change this back if I can real quickly. Actually, let me go back to my original one because I can do this pretty fast here. Let's go look at Boston. And so these are all the years for Boston. And again, if you're looking at this data on this top graph, what's one thing you might immediately start looking at and going, that's a little strange. And one of the things we see are these constant peaks, peak, 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 etc. And if I hover over them, this is April of 2010. This one is April of 2012. This one is April of 2011, April of 2014. What's going on here? Why would I keep having the same peak again and again and again in this particular month? So this is another way we would analyze this. We'd say, well, that's kind of weird. I keep year after year, the month of April seems to be special for Boston. What's going on? Has anyone got any guesses? It's a presenter trick to take a drink. I'm sure someone's probably going to guess it. It's the Boston Marathon. How would I know? Actually, I can put a filter on here and say, show me by athletic shoes, show me by shoe type. As a matter of fact, I'll do that. I'll take this region and get rid of the region. Let's go grab the shoe type, do this type or style. We might see it in cross training. Now I'm going to put it in, I want it in athletic shoes. So let's go for occasion. I'm going to swap out occasion here and get rid of the type. And I want to put it into athletic shoes. And now it's even more distinct. Spike, spike, spike. By the way, I see a huge drop. If I go back to where it was, I hear a huge drop in April of this particular year in 2013. I would have expected this to be really high, and it's not really high. And I always ask my students, what's going on here? And most of them think about it for a while, and they realize that was the year of the Boston Marathon bombing. So the store was in downtown. The store got shut down when the investigation started, so they lost a good day of sales because of the bombing that happened. So this is how the data kind of shows up in my tools and my forms. Now, one thing I want to show, I got to hurry up because I'm getting too long-winded, but this is good. I talked about the hierarchy. Let's get rid of this for a second. Let's clean this up a bit. This is my typical sales information. And I noticed that when I put in my sales date, it gave me year, quarter, month, and day. Hey, that's fantastic, but I may want to go even deeper. Or I may be like Microsoft and a number of other companies where my Q1 doesn't start January 1. Microsoft's Q1 actually starts July 1st. So they're about to turn over their fiscal year right now. So if I use the quarters based on this, Power BI has no idea how to rename the quarters based on how I use them. It's just using a standard calendar quarter. There's other things that I might want to do. So the way we solve this is something called a date time table. And the way we do this, the way we apply a date time table is we use something called M code. Now this is a little more advanced, so bear with me if you're relatively new, but you can watch and kind of understand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to generate my own table of dates and times that I can apply back to this data, which allow me to have a much more granular understanding of when stuff was sold. For example, I may want to know, I want to separate out my weekend sales from my weekday sales. My CEO asks, what day of the week are the biggest sales for us, not including the weekends? Is it Wednesday? Is it Tuesday? Is it Thursday? I have to have a way to dissect that so that I can apply those kind of reports and filters to my analysis. That's what a date time table does. And here's how it works. You're going to go get data, and there's tons and tons of data. I could click on more, and I could bore you to death by scrolling through this thing for hours, showing you all the data types that this can do. We're not going to do that. We're going to go to get data, and we're going to go create what's called a blank query. Now, Power BI supports a language called M code. M as in Mary, the letter M. And M code allows you to write in a script type format really advanced commands that can massage your data, transform your data, apply entirely new different views of your data. It's incredibly powerful. Power BI actually supports 4 separate developer languages. So I'm just talking about one of them. It also supports Python. It also supports DAX, which we'll get into here in a second. But anyway, here's how M code works. And again, I apologize, I'm just going to speed up. This is what M code looks like. And this may look daunting, but when you start reading through it, it's actually really simple. I want to insert the year. So go to the table, add a column, rename it year, and it's going to be the date.year based on the date column. That's all that's saying. If you've ever worked in Excel, it's almost exactly like how Excel works. I'm going to copy this whole thing, and I will share this with you at the end when I do a follow-up. I'm going to go into the advanced editor. This is where the scripting is done, and I'm going to paste that in. So it's a lot easier to read when it's color coordinated. It looks this way. But we don't have time to go into this in depth. I do that in my class. But when I say done, it has generated parameters that it's going to ask the user. What dates do you want me to create a date table for? By the way, this is kind of an industry standard one. And there's a good chance, depending on the size of your company, you may already have a corporate date table in play. And if that's the case, cool, use the one that your company already provides. If you don't, or you want to augment it even further, this would be a great solution to do so. In this case, my data runs from January 1st of 2010 to 12/31 of 2016. That just happens to be the sample data I'm using. This is where I would set my fiscal year start month. So if I leave it empty, it'll put it as January as the start of my fiscal year. If I was Microsoft, I'd put this as 7, meaning July 1st would be the start of my fiscal year. I'm gonna go ahead and just use it as is. I can put in holidays. So another question I may ask is, do our sales get better on holidays or worse on holidays? You can import the holiday schedule. I normally do that. We just don't have enough time. There's also a nationalization number down here. If you want to use a Jewish calendar, or a Chinese calendar, or whatever, you can do all that. I'm just going to keep this super simple. I'm going to say that we want to invoke this. When I invoke this, it just generated this table based on that script. And so what it did is it took every day, day after day, from 2010 to December 31st of 2016, and then it calculated the year, the quarter, the month, the day, we'll talk about what these ints are, day, month, year, month, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just to speed things along, I'm gonna go ahead and apply this into my query. So I've built it, I've imported it, and now it's sucking all those rows in. And so now I have this new table called invoked function, which means nothing to me. So I'm gonna right click and just rename this. And we'll call this date time, which is typically how everyone does this. The date time table now has all the tables that'll tell me on any given date. If I go back to the column here, I want to know on this date, was this a Monday to, oops, helps if I click the right table, date time, there we go. On this date, Friday, August 27th, 2010, I can look through this and I know this was a Friday. I know what week of the year it was, what day of the year it was, week ending, what fiscal year, fiscal quarter, all these different numbers. I mean, this thing keeps going on and on and on. And again, we get much more deep into this in a class type setting, but just understand that that's there. Now, one thing I have to do, I've imported this data, but again, I have to relate this data back to my database. So in other words, here is the date time, but you'll see there's no connections between this and my sales data. So to do this, it's very simple. I'm just gonna go in and manage my relationships. Got a call coming in, let me make that go away. And I'm just gonna create a new relationship, and all I have to do is say, go take the date time table, grab the date, and I want you to marry that up to the sales table, sales date. That's it. It'll look up all the dates here, and it'll match them to all the dates here. And when I say, okay, I'm done, everything's good, I'm gonna go back to my reports. Now you'll notice that even more detail has come into this crazy graph that I had. Why is that? Well, because instead of it figuring out the sales date from the hierarchy perspective, it took that away, and literally it's giving me the day that the sale was done. Why is it doing this? Why didn't it automatically come up with its own year and date and time? And the answer is because I built that in the date time table, and now that it sees that, it doesn't need to do any of the others. Let me show you what I mean. Instead of getting the sales date, I'm just going to go down to the year, drop the year in, and there's my same graph I had before. And you can build your own hierarchy. I can go in and put in the month and the quarter and anything else you want. I can just keep adding them in just like it built the hierarchy before. The difference is I'm using my own. I do want to show you it's not a mistake, but you need to understand what's happening, because it's going to mess your data up when you do this the first time. And what I'm about to show you literally took me about a month of troubleshooting to figure this out. I don't know why it was so hard, but it was really hard. I said, I want to see the quarter and year, or the month and year, right? So I've got a month and year. Let's take the year out. Let's put the month and year in. And when you do this, it gets crazy. It says January of 2011, followed by January of 2010, followed by 2013. It's no longer making hierarchical sense in terms of dates. And I couldn't figure out why, and it's scrambling up the data, and now it's totally useless. And I want to explain to you why. It's actually really simple. Let's go back to that date timetable, which we have right here. And what it's doing is, if I look at this and I look at this column month and year, so we'll go out here, month and year. It says July 2010, July 2010, July 2010, July 2010. When you run filters on this stuff, it's saying, okay, July 2nd of 2010 should be equal to July 2010. And then the very next one, it says July 9th of 2010 should be equal to July 2010. And Power BI is going to be like, I'm totally confused. You told me this one was July 2010, and now you're telling me this one's July 2010, and so is this one and this one. And that's what's causing this big scramble. The way to fix this is actually really simple. We're going to click on this column where it says month and year, and we're going to go up and tell it sort this column by another column. Instead of sorting it by the data you see in here, which repeats itself over and over and over again, they've added in another column down here that's called month and year, okay? And it's put it in as an integer that can be stacked and ordered. Instead of doing it alphabetically, which it's doing over here, I'm converting it into an integer, and then I'm able to sort the integer by its value so that it comes out in a time sequence. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Excuse me. I go to month and year. I tell it I want to sort by column, and I just go down until I see this thing that says month N, N being number, year. I click, doesn't appear that anything happened. Looks exactly the same. While we're here, by the way, I'll do the same thing. Anytime you see an ampersand, you're going to sort by the same thing, quarter N year. If I go down to quarter, I should see one with an N between it, quarter N year and quarter ampersand year. So those two line up. I can go further into day and year and all that. You get the point. I'm not going to belabor it. But once I set this, once I sort it, if I go back, it's still messed up. But watch what happens when I take this out. I'm just going to hit the X to make it go away. And now I'm going to tell it to redraw it back out using month and year. And this time, January, February, March, April, May, June. So by converting it from text to an integer, I can now stack those integers in their timeline sequence, and my chart makes a whole lot more sense. I know I went through that fast, but hopefully that'll help you. But this is amazing now because I have this date timetable where I can say, is it a business day? Is it a holiday? Is it a month ending? What week of the year? What week completed, etc. I may want to look at snow boots, and I want to know what time of year in the Northeast I should put my snow boots out because the sales start climbing. So I want to know winter months versus summer months versus spring versus fall. You can do all that with a date timetable. It's incredibly powerful. It's absolutely amazing. Okay, I'm running late, so I'm going to jump kind of to the end. There's just so much. I knew I wasn't going to be able to cover everything, and I even skipped major sections to show you what I was able to show you. I do want you to see some of the results that I have. I'll jump back to my class one here because I've got some of these already done. So again, we could go see for if I filtered this by a certain time frame for a given year. Actually, I could just do it right here. I don't want you thinking I'm copping out here. So I'm just going to put another filter down here. I'm going to throw the year in. So I have a date timetable. We'll go down to year. We'll toss the year into the field. Now this comes out as a slider, and I could pull this around. So I only want to see 2011, 2012, 2013. And notice that it's filtering. I don't want to see that much. You can slide this around. I can also pull this down, and I can make this appear as checkboxes. I could show it in different ways. It's supposed to allow me to do it as checkboxes. I'm sure they moved it. But anyway, now if I look through this, this is that thing I was talking about, Amelia, where we should see here just kind of disappear off the face of the earth. I have my dates wrong. But you just see these blank periods come about. Let me go back one or two more. Let's check her one more time. Don't make a liar of me. Okay, made a liar of me. I forgot what the date was. But anyway, you would see that. By the way, this is also really interesting. If I click on Phoenix, or if I click on Portland, or I can click on others, what you're going to see here, by the way, is some of these have 6 reps, some of these have 12 reps, some of these have a whole lot more. And you may ask the question, oh, I know why, it's because I've got the filter on. Let's take the filter off for a second. You may ask the question about why would I have a whole lot more reps in Charlotte, for example. And here's a great example. If I go back through here, look at this data, I can take off the sales date. Let me put it in again by year or month and year. And here's a great example. I see Aldo Brown, nothing in 2010, nothing in 2011, started 2012. I see Roderick, who was not a good sales rep. He was the biggest red I had, and he goes along, and then all of a sudden he just disappears. What happened? Well, Roderick left. He was fired, or he went on to do something else, and Aldo came in and took over. So I took a low performer here and replaced them with a high performer here. So this is a good swap. I got rid of a bad salesperson and brought in a really top performer who seems to be doing a really good job. Something happened at the end of this, though, in 2016. Aldo fell off the face of the earth. That's another anomaly. I want to figure it out. So you see how we can kind of wrap these things over again and again. This was the running shoe ones. I'd already talked about that. Cross training. Oh, DAX. What I did was I created a DAX deal, and I think I'm just going to do a webinar on DAX because I'm not giving it near enough justice. What DAX is it's a formula up here, and there are rules surrounding the formula. Basically, what it does is it says, I want to look at this data in a way that's not the way that you in Excel are used to doing. In Excel, you have a couple hundred formulas that you can use. Give me the present value of money. That's a formula that Microsoft created for you that you can apply into your data. The problem is, what if you want to create your own formula and there isn't one that exists inside the pre-canned ones for Microsoft? That's where DAX comes in. DAX allows you to manipulate the data in your table to create entirely new data sets that didn't exist before. So what I did here is, I don't know if you could see that, but I'm using the DAX formula that says, instead of looking at the value and giving me the total of the sales, I want you to give me the rank of the stores, comparing each store to each other store, and I want you to rank them in ascending order, meaning that the 16th store is my best store and the first store is my worst. So 1 is the lowest store and 16 is the highest. So if I take this off for a second, you remember how the original graph that we did was kind of spaghetti-ish and it was hard to see because some of the lines melded together. This is the exact same graph, but it's showing you only by rank. So it's putting distance between each and every line. There's the same amount of space. So it's much easier to kind of track and follow who's doing what as I look through this particular stuff. Now, again, I've got this set right now. If I go in here, this is by month and year. Let's just make it by year. It'd be a whole lot easier to see it. So I'm going to grab year, throw it up here. See how much easier that is to view. And now I can see who moved up and who moved down. I can drill deeper if I want to, but it cleans things up. There may only be $100 difference between this one and this one, but because this one was bigger, it had a higher value, its rank was higher. Therefore, I see it more clearly using a rank type formula. You can go crazy with these formulas. I worked with a company that drilled micro holes into things. And so we worked with them to build a DAX formula that, given the viscosity, the pressure, the temperature, the size of the tube that you're pushing a liquid through, it would use this DAX calculation and tell you exactly how big the hole needed to be in order to allow that liquid to pass through the hole. That's a great example. I mean, DAX formulas literally can be pages long. They're super advanced calculations. And I'm realizing I do need to do a whole nother formula deal on DAX. We'll deep dive on DAX. That's more advanced stuff, but boy, the power of what we're going to be talking about here and what you can do with this stuff is amazing. Before we finish, though, I did promise, I think Helen asked about, do we have to figure out all these anomalies ourselves? And the answer is no. So there's multiple things that Microsoft has done. First and foremost, they've included in the Power BI product the AI libraries from Microsoft. And they do, if you're going to be using them and producing them and sharing them out with others, you do need a Power BI premium license. If you're not, if it's just for yourself, you can actually use them just in your regular Power BI product. Here's an example, and I'll show you this real quick. I'm just going to copy this so I don't have to type everything over. But let's go to a new page. How would you do this? You go to this little dialog. It says Q&A. When you click on this, Microsoft has already read through your database and conceptually understands what the database is. Literally, it's interpreted it in English language so that you can now ask it questions that you might have of your database. So let me give you an example. Actually, it might be easier because I got to type and I don't want you to watch me making screw up after screw up. I'll just do it back on this one. There we go. So I've got two windows open now. Let's go to a new page. I'll drop in the Q&A because I want you to see it as we build this live. So it's read the database. It's now attaching this in, getting this ready to go. That's interesting that it's taking that long. That should have been instantaneous. There we go. It's got some simple suggestions. Show sales. Okay, I want to show sales. And if I hit enter, it will go in and it will create my sales for me. There we go. Here are my sales. I can say show sales by current store. And so it repopulated it. And if I go out here, you're going to see the current store. Let me take the one I did earlier. I'm going to paste this in. So I said, show me the top 10 current stores by the top 3 reps based on their actual price sold in 2012. So a very distinctive question that I'm asking it. And if I throw that in, assuming that this database I've set up correctly, I should be able to hit enter. Oh, come on. All right, we'll go back to the other one. This is why I had a backup, just in case my connection starts going slow. So this is here, I've done this, and it's automatically showing me the stores and the reps, and it's only including the top 3 reps for my top 10 stores. So it's kind of a weird way of thinking about it. Notice I'm filtering by 2012. I go in here and I change this to 2011, and I hit enter, and it instantly calculated it again. Now this is 1 million records. What if I want the top, instead of 3 reps, I want the top 2 reps? What if I want the top 2 reps that sold women's dress shoes, which you see here? So you literally just, as long as you use the vocabulary that's a part of your database, it will be able to answer any question for you automatically. So when you read it, what regions has the largest sum of sales of men's snowshoes in Q1? And you see the double underline. It's like, I don't understand what you mean by Q1. Would you like to define Q1? And I can actually click on this and I can go in and I can teach when I'm talking and I use Q1, what I'm referring to is a date time field that maps to the current quarter. And once I do that, then it'll come out and show me the preview of the result exactly as I wanted it. So I could go in here and say Q1 refers to date time table, okay? And then I could go even further and set the dimensions and do all that stuff, and it will go in there. The other thing we can do, this third one down here, it goes in here and says, what regions had the largest sum of sales of men's snowshoes in Q1, okay? Let's take out that Q1 because I didn't fix that. So let's put it in there. There we go. Largest sale by region of snowshoes. Okay, what's interesting is the word sales doesn't occur anywhere in here except for this table. You can go in and you can say add synonyms, and it will store it in Power BI and it will remember it. And so what I can do is I can say, look, when I'm in here and I'm talking about sales and I refer to actual price, I don't want to have to type, give me the sum of actual price, blah, 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 blah. So I can go in and add in a new name, my own vocabulary for the actual price. So we'll call this You wouldn't normally do this, but just to show you, I could call this the profit or Mike's profit or anything else I want to call it, Mike's profit. Okay, so I'm just giving this a name, and I'm teaching Power BI that when I use the word Mike's profit, I want you to reference it back to this thing called actual price. And as you fill out these synonyms, it allows you to talk in more plain English and get data back from your organization. So if I went here, instead of sales, I said Mike's profit, and notice it's auto detected and figured out, oh, you're probably talking about Mike's profit, and it works. So you can now take your industry terms and your corporate lingo, and you can add it into the synonyms, and you can now publish this out, and anyone who wants to ask a question can just ask in the English language, and boom, it'll generate these. And by the way, when it does generate these, I can now convert these into reports. So I can turn this into a regular Power BI report and do this for all of these. Just click, click, and boom, now they're regular reports that I can go out and publish. This is the last thing we're going to talk about because I'm right at the end of my session. It says, do you want to save your changes? I'll go ahead and hit save. It's now going to publish these out for me, and I get to determine where I want these to be published. I haven't set up anything except my workspace, so I'll just publish it to that. It says, hey, you already got one out there, but you made some changes. Let's go ahead and publish up the new one. So this is the last of Helen's questions, which is when you go into here, you'll notice it says I can open up this report and view it in a web browser. I can share it with my team. All the interactivity is still there. They can still spin and twist and do all the cool stuff. I can set restrictions on who can read, who can access, who doesn't get access. All that's still available. But here's the really cool one. I go to Quick Insights. What Quick Insights does, and it opened it up in a separate page. Let me bring it over here. So it's now using that same analytics that we saw earlier. It's looking through all of my table data, and it's running them through these algorithms, and it's going to find those anomalies for me without me having to do anything. This is part of the Power BI service, and Microsoft has really improved this significantly. I start seeing tons and tons of graphs and charts. Now, this is what it did in, 20 seconds? If you give it even longer, if you give it an hour or two, it'll go very deep in here. It's basically analyzing my data, and it's noticing where there are anomalies. Here's a cluster completely separated out from this cluster with these outliers. So it's saying reps and size from clusters grouped from the ISO date of year, blah, blah, blah. Here's some statistical anomalies that should all follow along this path. Here are some outliers, ups and downs that don't seem to match anything else. Here's one that just fell off the face of the earth. It found that one. It's talking about some interesting stuff. Women's shoes. We sell a lot more women's shoes than anything else. That's absolutely true. How many shoes do we sell in the weekday versus holiday versus weekend? It did all that analysis for me. And you just keep going. It's finding these anomalies. So you're still going to have to do the work, but this will do that first cut where it'll point out, hey, I found something really weird over here. You need to investigate and try to figure out what's going on. Boots is way out of scale with everything else. Go down here. Here are some reps that are falling way off the average midpoint. So this might be a case where my rep is actually, discounting shoes to their friends like below cost. So there's pilferage or stealing from the store. It'll find those and report back and kind of give you some analysis. But you can see it just keeps going and going. Here's another one, dot off by itself. And then you go in here and you start looking at it and you figure out some of these make perfect sense and you don't have to spend any time on them. Others of them are like, wait a minute, what's going on there? Relatively even suggested price by region. So from 102 to 102.05, so almost nothing. So yeah, I would expect them to all cost the same. Anyway, you would take these reports, you would start at this point, it's identified those anomalies, then you start drilling in using the tools that I got. Okay, people said cool trick. People asked about missing data. Someone guessed the sales rep not showing up for work. That's exactly right. Do you recommend a ribbon chart to look at the dollar contributions and rank together? Many users have not seen that in the past, seem to be overwhelmed by it. Yeah, this is getting into DAX and some of the amazingly cool stuff that you can do. To give you a real life formula for this, I told you about the work I did for Microsoft, and this isn't bragging. I promise you, I just was the right guy at the right place. But I did this analysis for Gates and the executives at Microsoft. We were looking at the impact that doing a seminar in a city in the United States has. You would think it would be all positive. It turned out there's actually a drop in sales in the month before we do a seminar. Why would that be? Because people are thinking about buying the next version of Excel, and they're like, well, wait a minute, I'm going to see what's coming up in the seminar to see if it's worth doing or not. So we'd actually get this, drop and dip, and then we get a huge boost. I would only have 500 people come to my event, but we would sell like we had just presented to about 10,000 people. And why is that? And the analysis was all about word of mouth. And people, we call it the Britney Spears effect. Only 16,000 people went and saw Britney Spears in concert, but they all came home and talked about it to their friends and family, and those people went out and bought her new album, for example. So that was real world analysis that I did. Gates liked it so much, he put it in his book, Business at the Speed of Thought. It's a best-selling book, and we're actually chapter 2 of that. So that's some real world experience stuff I was talking about to do it. So DAX is the same kind of thing. It allows you to build these complex relationships that find how one value adjusts to another value and impacts it, and it'll show you that in graphical form. The last thing I have here, this is my workspace. I was just going to point out, here's One Lake Data Hub, Apps, Metrics, Monitoring Hub, Deployment Pipelines. This is all the brand new stuff that just came out less than a month ago from Microsoft. And I will be doing a future session on all of this in the near future.